I'd like to dedicate this TED Talk to the late, great Lavelle Diet. He was an Emmy Award-winning journalist and broadcaster who was close to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and became a dear friend through our shared passion of diversity and inclusion. I came up with the word disciple because I realized I was becoming a disciple of diversity. And to me, diversity is all about respect, regardless of our race, our religion, our age, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or disability. We all deserve to be respected and have the same opportunities. And throughout this journey, I exhibited a great amount of grit and determination to raise the awareness of the importance of diversity and inclusion. To me, diversity is about differentiation. Inclusion is about collaboration and participation. And when these two things work in harmony, it really does lead to inspiration and ultimately innovation. My passion for diversity and inclusion started on a family vacation at the Fort Lauderdale Sheraton in 2005. My two daughters, Rachel and Hannah, were 8 and 5 at the time. And we were the first family at the hotel pool after a thunderstorm. And within approximately half an hour, we were joined by about 75 others, all of whom happened to be black. And as it turns out, we were in the middle of a wonderful African-American family reunion. And for the first time in their lives, they experienced being the only one. Now, how many in this room have ever experienced being the only one? An experience if you were in a meeting or a class or at a party and you were the only person of color. Maybe you were the only woman, the only person who happened to be LGBT, maybe the only person who was Jewish or Muslim, or the only person with a disability. But for me, growing up in Boston as a white male, I really didn't have to worry about being the only one. It was not anything I really concerned about myself. And I realized that I acquired a certain amount of privilege just because I was a white male, for no other reason. That day at the pool, after a little while, Rachel came up to me and said, "Dad, I don't feel comfortable. I want to go back to the room." And I said, "Okay, honey." We went inside and we sat down. And I said, "Look, Rach, are you uncomfortable because everyone here is black?" And I knew her response. She shrugged her shoulders and didn't say anything. And I said, "Look, honey, that's okay. You've never been in this situation before. But I want you to think about Christian and Chloe, the two black kids at your school, how this is their world every day. You know that God created everyone equally. It doesn't matter what your skin color is or what your religion is. We're all the same. But more importantly, I want you to think about how cool it is for this family. I later learned that 200 people from across the country came to the Fort Lauderdale Sheraton to hang out for a weekend and be together. I said, kids your age are meeting cousins they probably have never met before. And people my age are meeting cousins they haven't seen in years. So let's just go out and have fun and enjoy the day." So, like any other kid, she went outside, jumped into the pool, and literally became part of the family. It was just an amazing, a wonderful thing to see. And while I was there poolside, I was looking up and I was saying, this is happening for a reason. I don't know what I will do with this, but I will do something. And while that day transpired, I befriended this little boy, and he reminded me of myself when I was younger. He was a skinny little kid, and he was working his way around the side of the pool. And several times he let go and went under, and I reached down and I grabbed him. And we just made this bond, this connection. And I probably spent as much time with that little boy as I did my own two daughters that day. And as fate would have it, both of our families left the pool at the same time. We got on the same elevator, and we got off at the same floor. And his family went left, and my family went right. And all of a sudden, I heard this little voice yell out to me, "Hey, I'll see you by the pool tomorrow." It was really, really cute. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, but we're leaving in the morning." And he put up his little hand and waved to me and said, "Bye, friend." And I did the same. It was just so powerful. Our chills literally went up and down my spine. And while in bed that night, I'm replaying the events of the day, and I'm thinking about that wonderful exchange that we had and that great connection that I made with this little boy. But more importantly, as a parent, I thought about the incredible lesson that my daughter learned, one that she would never learn in Stoneham, where it was 95% white. And I thought about white kids in the suburbs, like my daughters Rachel and Hannah, who would never experience being the only one, especially in Boston. And then I also thought about the Christians and Chloes of the world, how they experience it all the time. So in a way, it brought me back to my childhood. And growing up in Everett in the 60s, 70s, and 80s was very similar to Rachel and Hannah's world in Stoneham. And two things really resonated with me when it came to diversity and race relations. Number one was the series Roots in the 70s, of course, and former Celtics legend Bill Russell. I was a huge Celtics fan. And I never understood why he was discriminated against because he was black. All he did was win a gold medal for the United States in the Olympics, in the Melbourne, Australia Olympics in 1956, and then he proceeded to win 11 championships in 13 years for the Boston Celtics. And, Bill Russell and Red Auerbach didn't see black and white. They saw one color, and that was Celtics green. It was all about winning. They put all their differences aside for the collective benefit of the team. So that really set the foundation for how I would treat people. And, I got back to Boston, and I said, well, I have to do something with this. What am I going to do? So later that year, I wrote a letter to Governor Romney, my state rep, and my state senator, and I shared the experience that I had with my daughter down in Florida, and also about how Bill Russell inspired me as a kid. And I filed legislation on the importance of race relations, diversity, and tolerance, especially from a white perspective, because I do realize we live in a world of disparities, where there are money, power, jobs, opportunity, education, healthcare. And I started to attend multicultural networking events, getting connected. I started going to diversity conferences. And I learned about the lack of underrepresented groups in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And I was fascinated by this. I was not the greatest student growing up. My father can attest to that. He was my principal. And I said, well, what if we had a sports program connected to STEM? I mean, if I had something like that, I would look at math and science completely differently, in a different light. But then I also thought about the children who needed it the most that weren't going into these fields, girls and children of color. So I came up with the idea of Sneakers to Beakers. And it's a startup, nonprofit, after-school program. And our mission is to inspire children, especially those from underrepresented groups, to become more engaged in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, through a multicultural sports-based curriculum. Every session is going to begin with a sports, physical-related activity where the students can experiment and experience STEM on the court or on the field, and then go into a classroom and do the same thing. A large component of this will be mentoring, where we're going to have informal educators, college students, and STEM professionals come in and talk to the kids and share their experiences. We've been doing science fairs and one-day programs the last year or so, and predicated on the funding that we receive, we expect to roll out the program as a pilot in Boston and New York City in the upcoming school year. One of the things that I've been blessed with, just by telling this story, is building an incredible team. committed, dedicated team led by my board of directors. My advisory board is amazing, and they've been mentors to me because this is a new experience, but it's something that I feel so deeply about. And I am taking a chance. These are uncharted waters, but when you believe in something so strongly, fear becomes a path. Dr. King said, "What are you doing for others?" Well, I hope that Sneakers to Beakers will enable kids to look at STEM differently. Whether or not they go into the STEM fields, who knows? But even if we impact a small amount of children, that's going to go a long way. This is what I dream about. That in 2020, I can hear a former student say, the reason I'm in the STEM field today is because of Sneakers to Beakers. As Whitney Houston sang, I believe that children are our future. Racism and discrimination is not something that we're born with, it's taught. So one of the large components of Sneakers to Beakers will be a multicultural component. So I'll give you a few examples. For math and baseball, you need to teach kids about fractions. So my example would be Jackie Robinson, who was the first African American to play Major League Baseball. If he got up 3 times in the game and got 1 hit, you would write it as a fraction. Identify the numerator, identify the denominator. Calculate his batting average. The kid would write a short paper about Jackie Robinson. We could show a short film. But of course, we would start out with a half an hour of a baseball-related activity, whether it's running the bases or something physical that will get the kids going. We conducted a one-day event at my daughter's school, and I was so pleased by the surveys we got back from the students. The two that stood out the most was one boy said, "I have ADHD," and it was so helpful to me to run around and calm me down before we went into the classroom. And the second one was from a girl who said, "I love the sports, I love the STEM, but I really love the multicultural component because no one ever talks about that." Another example would be science. The example that we use is calculating your sweat ratio in soccer. And the example I use is Brandy Chastain, how she was she called herself a chunky little girl growing up who had an eating disorder. And she turned out to be a world-class athlete who scored the game-winning goal for the U.S. soccer team in the Olympics down in Atlanta. Another example would be Nancy Lopez. We would use her as a golfing example with engineering, how the dimples on a golf ball actually make a ball go further because it reduces the ear drag on a golf ball. And the challenges that she faced, being a Mexican American, her parents weren't allowed to play at the local country club. She had to travel 200 miles to practice. They didn't have a girls' golf team back then at her school, so all she did is lead the boys' team to 2 state titles. And we also have examples about technology in the Paralympics, how technology now is to the point where it's so far advanced that disabled athletes will soon be outperforming able-bodied athletes. Now, since I started with a quote, I'll end with a quote. Do you have a proclivity for inclusivity? Thank you very much.